Hi, it's time for another take two with Therese at Altenew, and I've got a stamp focus today using the Exotic Garden stamp set and coordinating die. And this is a really beautiful set. It's quite an intricate bouquet, and I'm going to do two different cards very similarly, but change them up and share the whole process with you along the way. Now, I thought it'd be fun to share two different watercoloring techniques with you today, starting with this version here where I've stamped the image and heat embossed it with some pure white embossing powder. Now, I didn't do the best job with my embossing, but I kind of figure out a way around that a little bit later on, and I'll share that with you. The colours that I've used today are fairly similar. Like, what I decided to do was paint all the flowers one colour and pretty much all the leaves one colour, and then just change them up afterwards. And for this first image, I'm using the watercolour brush markers, and I'm working on some Bristol Smooth cardstock because I know that these actually blend out really well on this cardstock. And I've got the water brush, and I am dipping it in a well off to the side. I do have some water within the brush as well, but I tend to actually use the well of water rather than the water that's within the brush. And these are a really easy medium to use because the colours are already on the brushes. So what I'm doing is actually just laying down some colour where I think the shadows sort of be, working in really small areas, maybe just a petal at a time, sometimes a few petals, and then I add the water and sort of drag out the colour. If you're working too big an area, it has a tendency to be more difficult to blend out the colours. And because I'm using the watercolour brush markers, I'm not actually using a lot of water on my images, so that does dry really quickly, and I can come back in and add my other colours over top. And what I did here was just chose a few different sort of oranges, yellows, and even some of the deeper reds to add some depth to these images and just change up that base colour that I put down. I'm trying to get more patience with letting things dry and adding new layers and then letting them dry. But it's not easy. On the leaves here, I just wasn't getting the depth that I wanted in the colours, so I did come in and actually add direct to the cardstock with the darker greens, but also topped it up with a bit of I can't remember, I think it might have even been like one of the crimson colours, just to add some sort of, and it gave like a brown undertone to some of the leaves. And then as a finishing touch, I did come in with the a really pale light green blue around the whole edge. Now set that aside to dry. I'm going to work on my second image now. This one's a little bit different. I've stamped it with some Obsidian black ink. I'm still working on the Bristol Smooth, but this time I want to use the artist's watercolours. Now these are in the colour families of the inks. So what I actually did here was looked at the colour family of the inks from the water brushes that I used and tried to keep a really similar palette. So it is going to look different because I'm painting with the brush and painting paints this time, and it's also going to have the black outline. So it is going to be a bit more of a washy look, and I don't have the wells of the embossing to sort of trap the colour, so I have to be a little bit more careful about touching one colour up against the next one, because if it's still wet it might make the colours blend where I don't want them to. But I did exactly the same thing. I did come over top, I let it all dry. I did bring my heat tool in on the low setting a few times just to speed up the process, and if I kind of felt like I'd added too much colour, I could just come in with a paper towel and dab some away. And then when I sort of was happy with the base colour, then I would actually come in and add a few more layers and try and add some extra depth. I found that this these images just weren't getting the depth that I wanted, so I did actually come in and add some darker colours at the end. But I think when I'm colouring with watercolours, I feel like I want to get the depth straight away, and you just can't. You have to be patient. One good thing about this image though, it's a bouquet. It's pre-stamped as a bouquet. So what that means is I don't have to do any masking, and it's all set, ready to go. And it has a coordinating die, so even better. I actually came in with the leaves here and added some of the blues and some dark teal green colours, and that just added a different shade to those leaves and added a bit more depth. And I came in with the brown on this one too. So now it's time to start assembling my cards. I'm going to start with the watercolour brush marker version, and I basically just used the Create-A-Wreath die to cut the section of the image that was stamped the best. So where my poor embossing was, I basically just cut most of that away. And I've got a sentiment here, which is from the Crystal Frames set. It has some really nice sentiments in this set. And I've die cut the Create-A-Wreath, the circle again, out of some pale grey cardstock, and I'm popping that up on the front of my top fold card, and then I can pop up the actual die cut circle that I did. And I'm not actually putting the inlay circle, I'm just leaving that as a negative recess to create a white border around my image. I think that looks really pretty. And then all that's left to do on this card is pop up my sentiment, which I did do that on some dark grey cardstock. And I covered that tiny little bit of embossing that still wasn't perfect there. So no one will ever know. My second card, I actually used the coordinating die this time to cut out the flowers. And I've got another panel of the pale grey cardstock, and I'm actually going to cut out the centre of this because that's where I'm going to place my flowers on the front of my card. Before I do that, I want to add some of the dark grey cardstock to the front of my top fold card because I want this to be sort of recessed behind my flowers and just be kind of peeking through around the edges. And speaking of edges, I just had to cut that scrappy bit off the side. So these are the two pieces of the pale grey cardstock. I'm just going to adhere them to the top and the bottom portion of the front of my card, and this is all being attached directly to the card front. But what I want to do is actually pop my flowers up, so they're going to be sitting up just slightly higher and give that sort of shadowed effect. And by having the dark grey cardstock underneath, it looks like even more of a shadowed effect. So I just think it's really pretty. I really wasn't sure how this card was going to go, but in the end I think it looked great because I added this awesome layered die cut from the Hello and Hugs die set and stamp set. So the die set comes in 2 layers, and I've got a piece of jet black cardstock, and I actually used the Bristol Smooth cardstock for the word hello and for the sub sentiment because I'm weird like that. I don't like to mix and match my white cardstocks. Like, to the naked eye you really can't see it. I just can't, when I take a photo though, like for my blog and for the video here, you can really see it. But anyway, the sub-sentiment is from the same stamp set, and I stamped that with some crimson, which went really well with my flowers. So everything will be linked at the blog, and you can find the link for that in the description. Thanks for visiting. Bye.